Ladies and gentlemen, well, here I am with the John Deere. I've been working on this thing for about 2 weeks now, and I've had all kinds of goofy problems with it, and I couldn't get it to charge. I put a new alternator on it, that didn't do any good, and I got to checking some of the electricals, and I found a couple of wires that were that go to the PTO. They got wrapped around the shaft, the pulley shaft, and it rubbed holes in them. Well, it just wore off the insulation, and it shorted out. And somebody had put a 30 amp fuse in this piece right here, and I replaced it. And when I did, then the starter worked and everything seemed like it was working. And then I had it running one day, still wasn't charging, but I had it running. And I turned on the PTO, and when I did, it blew that 30 amp fuse. So I got to checking, and I went underneath, and I took the PTO off. I cleaned it up somewhat. I got the part number off of it in case I need to buy another one. And I fixed the wiring. There was actually three wires, two ground wires and a hot wire. I took each of them separately. I taped them up, and then I taped all three of them together. And I also added a plastic tie wrap around it to hold the wires away from the pulley shaft, which I don't understand that. I don't know how the wires got up against it in the first place, but anyway, I put that on there as a safety measure to keep the wires away from the pulley shaft. And this morning, a gentleman gave me a suggestion yesterday. He said unplug the alternator, which is, it plugs into the voltage regulator right here. The black wires are the wires that come out of the alternator, and then it goes into the voltage regulator. Well, this wire here, it goes back through the charging system to charge the battery. Well, it also runs up through the ignition switch. And I was thinking maybe there was a problem with the ignition switch, but anyway, he suggested that I unplug it here, which I did, and test for the voltage here, which I had already done that. But today I did something a little different that I didn't do before. I hooked up my voltmeter, and now that's AC voltage coming out of here. So I hooked up my voltage regulator, or my voltage meter, and I started up, and it was running like, oh gosh, 12, 13 volts, something like that. But what happened, I over revved the engine. I went past governor speed, and when I did, it jumped up to 26 volts, and then it went from 26 all the way up to a little over 36 volts, which is great. So I let it go back down to governed speed, maximum governed speed, and I plugged this back in, and then I tested it, the voltage at the batteries, and I had 13.6 volts, which is great because it needs at least 13.5. But then when I over revved it again, it went up to like 13.9, 13.95 or something like that. So it's almost to 14 volts. So anyway, my wife is getting me a tachometer for Christmas for these small engines. At that time, I'll check the RPM on it, make sure it's within range, and if I can, I'll increase the RPM through the governor a little bit, and maybe that would help put out more amperage. And I also told the customer that I was not going to hook up the headlights because if the PTO's on and the headlights are on, the alternator may not be able to keep up. And I want it, with the way it is now, I'm sure it's not going to be a problem with the blades running and all that, so it should be okay. And there's the hood that came off of this thing. As you can tell, it's kind of dirty, but this thing's been set for about four to 5 years anyway. And like I said, I've done a lot to it already. I changed the oil filter. I readjusted the valves. I put a new fuel pump on, new fuel filter around here. And these are pretty simple to do. It's not rocket science by no means. And in this piece right here, now this goes into here. to the valve cover, and it gets vacuumed to run this. Well, I put this silicone on there because that thing had a few cracks in it, and I figured it was probably leaking. So I put the silicone on it, and ever since I've done that, then the fuel pump's been working great. I still have the old fuel pump. If the customer wants it, he can have it. If not, I'll keep it myself, and maybe if I need to, I could use it again, because that really wasn't as bad as I thought it was. I'll put it that way. But anyway, this thing runs pretty good. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start it up, run it, and then over rev it. And I'll tell you, this thing, it sounds pretty awesome when it's running like that. Man, I'd love to have one of these to put on a go-kart, because that could be a fantastic go-kart. Get rid of the muffler, and you can see right here the exhaust pipes, they come down from the head up in there, and you could cut the pipes off and run dual pipes with it. I mean, how many times have you seen a go-kart with a 2-cylinder engine with dual exhaust? I mean, that's just, to me, that sounds pretty cool. And I get me a 2-cylinder engine, I just may build me one. But anyway, I want to start this thing up and see how it's going to sound. Put the throttle to choke in full position. It's about, I don't know what the temperature is. I think it's about 50 degrees, somewhere around there. Anyway, I've already had this thing running this morning, so it should start pretty well, I think. I know I'm a little bit of a hot rod, but I think that sounds pretty nice. For no more than what it is, that sounds pretty nice. Well, thank you folks for listening to it anyway. Have a good day. Bye.